You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
We are visiting the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music, spending the week July 9th through the 12th at Concordia University in Nebraska. The Institute is sponsored by the LCMS Office of National Mission Worship, and we get to talk with some of the attendees at this institute and learn a lot about worship, learn about liturgy, preaching, church music, all those things that intersect and are part of that. Today we're going to talk about graphic design and visual art.
I'm very excited about this.
I've noticed. Yes, I am too. I appreciate all those things that contribute to what we see when we gather for worship, when we gather for the divine service. Our guest that we'll speak with in just a moment, April Parviz. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting the Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, April Parviz. She's graphic designer and visual artist. April, welcome to the Coffee Hour. Thanks.
So excited. Hi, April.
Thanks for making some time for us here at the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music. I know that you're missing some of the sessions. So thanks for making some time for us. Let's start with graphic design. Maybe a definition. I know Sarah knows what it is because she
I also work
studied.
in this world. April and I went to school together.
We did. We had classes together.
We did. It was very fun.
That explains the connection.
We were the class clown.
So for me and for the listener, not for Sarah, can you maybe give us a definition of what is graphic design? And are there, within graphic design, are there different denominations?
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, and they keep on splitting, and there's just, you'd be nice if, anyway. So, graphic design, it's anytime you see, I guess, visual information that someone put there and situated it. So, anyone can do graphic design. This is not the question you're asking. So I would say there's print and digital are kind of the big two differences.
Yeah.
And so digital graphic design, like social media posts and things like that. And then print is primarily what I do. So I do layout design for my church. Well, I also do some digital stuff, but at this point, primarily layout design. So that's when you've all been to church, probably, if you're listening to this podcast.
Good chance.
When you look at a bulletin, that has been graphically designed.
Yeah.
Technically. Yeah. So if you do bulletin layout, then you are a graphic designer.
Yes.
I know. Anyway, so I guess maybe that's an okay definition.
Yeah. Just just separating it from studio art, painting and drawing and that kind of thing. That is a different, studio art, classical art is it's a different thing than graphic design.
Definitely. Well, graphic design, I would say, primarily handles information.
Yeah.
But you can also be a visual artist who is just in the digital world.
Mm-hmm.
So I am also a visual artist.
Yeah.
And I do some of my visual art digitally.
Yeah.
So that would, I suppose, fall under graphic design. But I also do a lot of visual art with my hands without a computer. So.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about that later because we're doing some really cool stuff. So we'll get to your projects that you're working on. Let's talk a little bit more about graphic design, visual arts, and the church and how all of this kind of fits together. So how do visual arts and graphic design serve the church, serve the ministry of the word?
Well, can I talk about just my church specifically?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I work for Holy Cross Lutheran Church in St. Louis, right by CPH. And we have a arts center called Intersect Arts Center, which is super cool. It runs out of the building that was the St. Louis Seminary before it moved to Clayton.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I was initially hired. So I started going to Holy Cross, and I was a freelance graphic designer at the time. And they were like, we have this idea. We want to do these things called feast services. And they were like, we want to take art and liturgy and music and put it all together and make it look really nice, in a service folder. Could you do something like that? And at that time, layout design was already one of my favorite things. So I was like, totally. So they hired me freelance to do 3 or 4 of them. And then they just hired me full time. And now we are up to 59 at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that. And we're doing one here on Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you say? How does graphic design and visual art serve the church? That was the initial question. Okay.
Yeah.
So That is like a huge part of the a huge conversation that we're constantly having at Holy Cross and Intersect. We really, really believe that art can just extremely enrich. And I personally believe, because I have had a lot of experiences with other people's art, enriching my own worship experiences. Yeah. So, yeah, and also just lots of different artists. And we don't just have Lutheran artists. We don't just have Christian artists. Sometimes we even have people who are even like hostile to the faith art in these services. But then our Pastor Bob, he'll preach on them. And it's really incredible how much I've grown as a thinking person.
Yeah.
And as a person who cares for other people and loves my neighbor, through experiencing art being threaded into our services on a fairly regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I answered the question.
Good job. Where does excellence play a role in the work that you do and other artists do in serving the church?
Yeah.
Does excellence matter when it comes to art in the church?
That's such an interesting question to me right now. I'm like very on. I've written something in my own studio, which is at Intersect. It's in one of the old seminary and dorm rooms, actually. I wrote it. It says, "Be excellent, but don't hurt yourself."
Oh.
And it's in a giant circle. And then like a couple months later, I added, "or others." Yeah. Because I think like with art and music, I was raised as a classical musician, like especially classical music. We're having this conversation like all the time. Like, it feels like you like need to be excellent in order for it to be good or right or to communicate what it's supposed to communicate. But I think that's just completely false. And this is also coming out of, so Sarah is probably familiar, well, of course, you're familiar with Dr. Richard Fisher.
Yeah.
And so I was in Wind Symphony at Concordia, Chicago, and I was just at his reunion concert. He just celebrated his 50th anniversary directing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's
That's amazing.
Anyway, he talks about this a lot, and it was really nice to hear him talk about it again, because I was like, wow, I think his philosophies are very deeply threaded into my own philosophies as an artist with regards to excellence, where he talks a lot about how it is important to try to get the notes right. And like if you're an artist, it's important to try to balance the color right, or it's important to make sure that like you bold those words right, or
Yeah.
But the thing that's much, much, much more important is this, like, what's the word he kept using? Intrinsic. It's this like intrinsic, like emotional. I don't want to use the word power, but it's like prayer. Like you can pray for people you've never met before, and like why would you do? And you might never meet them. Like why would you do that? Like for the same reason that you would push the emotions through the music to a person across the congregation or whatever, who you might not talk to. And same with art. Like a lot of art is even more that way, where like most people don't actually ever talk to the artist, but there's this thing like in your soul or what, like this, and I don't know. Well, it's from God, of course, but I don't know. Sorry, I don't know how to explain this very well. I think excellence is good, but I don't think that it's the top priority, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
No, I love that, because when you can do something technically perfect, but if nobody understands it or connects to it, then is like, what is the worth of that? If there's no relationship happening in your art, whether it's music or visual art or graphic design, like the whole point of it is to draw people in and to connect people to what you're trying to tell them.
Yeah, and to God.
Yeah, right. So,
and if you were strangling yourself while you were producing it, like, it's not.
Is that really the best way to do it? Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's really important. And I mean, that's how it is with us too. Great. And
yes, we aim for excellence.
We aim for excellence, but like the relationship part of it, that part of it of really connecting with people is really important too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you're a graphic designer. You get to do layout design. What are some of the misconceptions or things that come up when you tell people what you do as a graphic designer, visual artist?
Well, I guess like as a visual artist and graphic designer, or just graphic designer?
Either.
Okay.
some things you want people to know about what you do.
Well, the visual art aspect is interesting because my own visual art is very, it's strange. I love talking to you about this, Sarah, because like you'll get it. It's strange being trained to be a logo designer, which I also love logo design.
Yeah.
And then leaning into this like really big chapter of my life of like visual design, where now, and I'm like reading all of these artists for in the feast services. I've learned kind of how to like read and like interpret or like, and so now I've almost like paired logo design with visual design, and now I have like symbolism and like a language and like stuff like that in there. And that's the thing that I can't really get people to understand. And if I try to explain it, I get a lot of like, what is? So some people kind of get it, but it's interesting because it's not, I've been trying to figure out how to talk to people about it because I understand there is a lot of misconception because there just isn't really a language for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out how to, I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're learning about graphic design and visual art in the church today with guest April Parviz. We are at the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
At Concordia University, Wisconsin, we believe you were created for a reason: to use your God-given gifts to help others, to live a life of self-sacrifice in a me-first world, to live a life that's uncommon. Whether you're taking one of 50-plus online programs or learning with us in person on the shores of Lake Michigan, you'll be equipped to make an uncommon impact. Learn more at cuw.edu. Concordia University, Wisconsin. Live uncommon.
Welcome back to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
I'm talking with April Parviz today. She's a graphic designer and visual artist. We are at the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music, learning about the ways that graphic design and visual art serve the church. April, how did these become a passion for you, visual art and graphic design? Where did this love for these begin?
This is really funny, actually. So I was at Concordia, Chicago. I went for education, and my freshman year, I didn't turn in my last paper into English comp to Dr. Ragnar, and it's just my fault. But I got a C- in the class, and I went to my academic advisor, and they're like, well, you have to retake this class if you want to stay in the education program. And I was like, want to do it. So I was like, well, what degree can I get with a C- in English? And he just like listed all kinds of things. And one of them was graphic design, which I actually wasn't into art as a kid. I was into music, but I had started coloring all the time in college, and people were like, "Oh, you're an artist," and I was like, And a couple people were like, or someone in the graphic design program was like, "You should maybe." It was Tim Fode. He was like, "You should maybe like consider graphic design." I was like, "Whoa, okay, oh, okay." So then when the person was like, "Graphic design," I was like, "Yes, I can do it with a C-." Sure. So like, yeah, then I loved the art, the teachers at Concordia Chicago, and it was perfect for me. Like, it was just, yeah. And then when I graduated, I wanted to do studio art, actually.
Oh.
And I told my parents, and they were like, that's not marketable. You need to do something. So I did do the graphic design plus the studio art minor. And then when I graduated, I was like, I don't think I like graphic design. I don't know why I got that degree. But then I don't know, I worked at it. I was like, well, I got it, so I guess I got it. So I like did various little jobs in graphic design and then freelanced forever. And then I wasn't actually passionate about graphic design until these feast services. And now I'm like, oh, it's a dream. Like I feel like I just like I could not have imagined like. Yeah. So I get my studio out of Intersect too. So like, and they give me 2 hours a week to do studio art, and they're encouraging all of this all the time. And I'm just like, it's like, so Dr. Fisher just said this about his job too. He's like, I could not have imagined this. Yeah. I could not have I did not create this job. I did not. So it's all God. It's just like, wow, he made this dream job that I could not have imagined.
Yeah.
So now I'm passionate about graphic design.
Yeah. It's so funny. Sometimes our stories of how we end up in the positions where we are, the jobs that we're doing, and we're like, I didn't write this story for myself.
No.
I couldn't even think of this 10 years ago. Yeah.
I was just like flowing around in the wind, seeing, and I like it now.
Well, that's good. Who else? You mentioned Intersect being very influential for you. Who else is really influential for you and really helps shape and form your art? What are your influences?
Okay, I actually have some of these people listed on my website. Like I could say,
Okay.
oh, okay, I will say my current series, which I wasn't actually making visual art for a while. I kind of paused. I felt I was kind of dormant, which actually is something a lot of artists go through. So if you're an artist and you're dormant, that doesn't mean you're not an artist right now, everyone. Anyway, okay, so yeah, I was dormant and I was just like, it was one of our feast services. Well, it was several of that started to kind of like wake me up. One of our artists, his name is Delro Roscoe. So his work started to kind of like, I don't know, inspire, I guess is the word. Inspire me a lot. And what is her name? Eugenia Sherman Brown, I think, is the name of another mosaic artist. Don't quote me on that. I mean, I'm on a podcast, so. But the main one during that chapter was Mina Matoka. And we had her for the first Sunday in Lent, I believe it was. And her work in that series is all made out of ashes.
Oh.
Well, it's ashes, like mixed media with other things.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. Actually, we have one of the feast services here. You should come look at it at some point. It's so beautiful, but like dark and just like pulls you in. And one of the pieces has a face that's just like looking at you, kind of like calling to you, like imploring. And I think the title is I Wish I Had Known You, I Wish You Had Known Me. And I read the title and I saw the eyes and I was just like, and it reminded me of, I always quote the Bible wrong, but it reminded me of the story that Jesus tells about how like when you come to see me and you're like, hey, Jesus, and you're like, I don't know who you are. Yeah. I was like, I don't want that to happen to me.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want him to say, I wish I had known you. I wish you had known me. And I was like, yeah. And then I was like, what? So then I started making all this art, revisiting a piece I had made. So this was 2022, like January 2022. So I was revisiting a piece I had made, but I'm talking about Mina Matoka. You're asking about people who influenced me. So I'll pause that. So Mina Matoka, and then also Kelly Cruz is a huge, she's so wonderful. And she is the artist featured in the Psalm Festival service that we're going to have on Thursday night here.
Oh.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's in Kansas City. She is like a modern day psalmist, but like a visual psalmist. Like cool. She's so wonderful. But all of us suffer a lot of things and most of us don't talk about it, I think. But she does, and she does it within the context of her relationship with God. So she writes, and she also has just, oh my gosh, her art is so beautiful. I just wish I could, if you're listening, look up Kelly Cruz, Kruse. You will be so inspired. So yeah, Kelly Cruz. Marxhausen is a huge influence to me. Yeah. So I'm like geeking out. Like I walked past that. Oh, sorry, no one can see what I'm pointing at. There's a Marxhausen right behind me.
Oh yeah.
I geeked out when I saw it. I was just like, oh my gosh. So my dad took a call to St. John in Forest Park, Illinois, my junior year of college. And when we were looking at the church, there were the 12 disciple Marxhausens that are on display in the gallery right now here were in his church. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I loved them so much. And and that was before I was like really deeply appreciating artists. So, and the more I've learned about Marxhausen, the more I'm just like really inspired about his life and all of the various works that he did. Who else? Dr. Fisher. Dr. Richard Fisher is a huge influence for me. I'm sure there's a lot more people, but those are the ones coming to mind right now. So, yeah.
The next question could be looked at from either direction. How is your art a reflection of who you are and what you believe? And or how does what you confess and believe shape your art?
Okay.
You can take whatever direction you want with that.
Well, okay, so the series that I am doing that I probably will do for the rest of my life is called Sleeper's Wake. And so, like I was talking about that Mita Motoka piece, I feel like that piece, like in culmination with a bunch of various things, kind of like woke me up. And I started this revisiting that work and trying to figure out like what being awake means. And then I started finding there's so many verses in the Bible about it. And they mean all kinds of things. I mean, sometimes it sounds like it's talking about death. Sometimes it sounds like it's talking about like just being present, or, like, so it's all over the place. So I'm just constantly trying to figure out what it means. Well, I think I have figured out, but I think I've figured out how I stay awake and how we are meant to stay awake. And I think it's when you love God above all things and when you love your neighbor as yourself. So kind of like obvious, like, but it's really easy not to do that. It's like really easy. So when I find myself the most like quote unquote asleep, it's when I'm like proud or like selfish, or busy is a big one, like getting really busy, not like taking in joy. Anyway, the reason, so I make these pieces to stay awake and to try to like continue to make sure I'm like always reading the Bible and trying to get to know God as a person. So he won't say to me, I wish I had known you and I wish you had known me, So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. That's my favorite thing to say today. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Tell us more about this series. And you've made quite a few pieces in this series. What is it all about? And how can we connect with it? Because we're going to share the link to your website and the show notes for this so people can go and actually look at what the series is. But kind of the rundown elevator speech. I know it's more than probably the time we have.
Oh, it definitely is. But I do need to have a good summary for it. So, okay. So the first one, how much time do we have? Because I can't tell.
About 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. So the first one I did in 2015, right after I almost died from diabetic ketoacidosis. Yeah. My dad was there. He saw my heart flat rate for 10 seconds on a heart rate monitor. So I came out of that, praise God, and it gets kind of dark. Okay. I had been in a really dark place leading up to that. Yeah. I had almost just wished that I wasn't alive. So then when I didn't die, when I came out of that, I almost wished that I had for a little bit. But then it was like a light switch. I just was more alive than I ever had been. I was worshiping at Reliant in St. Louis at the time, and they were doing I don't remember what all they said, but they gave me this like instruction to try to get to know God, like listen, like duh. But like listen to, like read your Bible, like listen, like as if he's talking to you, like right now, like you're sitting with him, like with a coffee. And so I think like that woke me up at the time, but I thought that it was traumatic growth. That's what a TED Talk called it. So I was like, I'm experiencing traumatic growth. So I made this piece on it, and then I like moved on with my life. And then I was experiencing the same level of like awakeness in January 2022. And I was like, what is this? So I started making them again. So the first piece I called Failure. So the first like 8 pieces in this Sleeper's Wake series were originally called Failure. Like I was titling them Failure because I was just trying to like figure out what this meant. And then I was at an artist retreat. I ended up out. I was like reflecting on all of this. I was writing my artist statement for it and trying to figure out what this was. And I realized that the thing that was the same about this time and the time before that was this like trying to get to know God like he's a person and like listening to him like talk to me. And I played. I was out in nature playing my flute by myself, and I was playing this list like simple Bach tunes, and the very last one is Sleeper's Wake, and I was like, oh. And it's like always been one. I mean, it's everyone's like favorite. It's so good. But I was like, that's what these are. Duh. So the symbolism has changed from like what it was the first time. But so if you look at them, they all have the same formula across all of them. So the bottom is simple. It always goes up at least once, and then it breaks, and there's just like a space, and then it starts back over again, and then it's much more elaborate at the top. And so the symbolism within the sleeper's wake formula is the bottom is a person who's asleep, the break is where they wake up, and the top part is that person now awake. So wake up.
How have you been involved in Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music?
Well, I have a table with a bunch of my art on it, and my pastor, Paul Gashler, came with me, and he has a table next to me with like feast service stuff for Intersect and Holy Cross. And I designed the layout for the Psalm Festival website. Then I also, so my dad, his name is Leonard Payton, and he is a pastor, and he is also a musician, and he wrote a very interesting and beautiful arrangement or setting to Compline back during his vicarage at St. John Wheaton when I was a sophomore in high school. And freshman, doesn't matter. So I love it. I love his setting of Compline so much. It's just like very calming and soothing to me. And so I was very excited to learn that he was going to be doing 2 of them here. And so I was like, ooh, I just want to make a layout design of your Compline, and also kind of like we call them snack services when they're smaller, like a small, but with my own sleepers wakes, because it all ties in very much. I mean, on the back, I put, when I awake, your presence will give me joy. Yeah, which just ties in with now, like the current chapter of Sleepers Wake I'm on is joy. And it's all happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited about them.
Lastly, how can we follow your work?
Probably the best way is actually, if you go to my website, I have a tab called Thoughts. And on that tab, you can sign up for a really casual newsletter that I send out maybe once a month-ish. That, like, I wasn't sending them. I'm sorry. It's ending. We're ending, right?
What's your website?
It's aprilparviz.art.
Very good.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
We'll put it in the notes today as well. April Parviz, graphic designer and visual artist at the Institute on Liturgy, Preaching, and Church Music. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour.
Thank you. This is super fun, guys. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golsa.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit kfuo.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@kfuo.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.